Hello, and welcome back to the new episode of Cyber Risk Podcast. In the previous episodes, we have gone into the depth of cyber risk management and risk identification. Today, I am super excited to have with me Vinod Madhavan. Vinod leads the GRC function at Honeywell Corporation, and today we will talk about continuous cyber risk management and how Vinod has led the transformation of risk management inside Honeywell over the last 3 to 4 years.
Thank you, Pankaj, and happy to be here. I'm excited for the conversation that we are going to have. Thank you.
So, Vinod, I want to talk about the three lines of defense. Recently, Forrester published a research article on how the three lines of defense are merging and how that might not be the best way to think about continuous risk management in the future. What is your take on three lines of defense? How have you implemented the model? How relevant is it in the future?
In the past, there are, three lines of defense and different teams are doing it. There's a possibility, and it is actually reality, that all of the lines of defense are using different playbook, different regulatory. They're not probably using the same language that other lines of defense is using. So there's always been a difference in how they looked at the requirement or a control. So I think one of the things that we have done to build that integrated lines of approach is so that you bring the lines more closer, not far, right? You bring that more closer, is that we built this common control approach where we are, boiling all of these regulatory requirements down into, common control approach. And that's the same common control that we then use across all three lines of defense. So that has helped us in integrating that. So I do think going into the future, and then you use that as a model, it's still valid. Continue using it, but also add integrated approach into it, bring technology and automation. There is a lot that AI can do right now, right? There's a lot of repetitive tasks and there's a lot of things that happens in all lines of defense where AI and technology and automation can definitely and should definitely be helpful. And then bring agility, like in a communication and collaboration between the lines of defense, increase the communication, right? Increase that, enhance it. There used to be a time where corporate audit would just be there and they would come and do the audit, and here are the issues, gaps that you need to go fix it. But there's always even a gap of what level of controls are used between. We don't have that right now with our corporate audit. We have brought that communication and integration together. We use a common control. So I think that's where we were making change into using that as a model, and then looking into the future, how can we change and evolve from a standard approach that we have into a next gen lines of defense, next gen three lines of defense.
So if I look at those three capabilities, common controls, integration, integrated approach, and automation, and then think about this from a risk management perspective. So the R of
right,
right? How have you seen things evolve in the industry? How are you thinking about your game plan? What have you done already, and what is on your roadmap? So can you give some guidance to your peers on how to think about this end-to-end GRC 2.0? And I'm especially focused on the risk management part of it.
I would say definitely embracing. One is definitely embracing the technology. I call that as transformation is the key, because you do need to going into a technology is not enough, but you need to embrace the technology and then transform, right? I do see that as one of the area that as GRC leaders we need to focus. We do need those technologies in order for us to start enabling AI capabilities and all of that. The second, if you look at if you look at the R, is understanding the trends. The threat and trends in the industry, and then what impacts your organization, and then based on the type of business and then the tool sets and the application that you have, right? Not all the industry trends and risk and threats that directly impacts you. But depending on the type of business that you're doing, your company is doing, and then if you understand the trend and threats in on the outside, you would need to know how that really impacts you. And then the last one would be that break down the silos. It would be that how do we foster more culture? Like to my earlier point about integrated approach, break down the silos. There are multiple risk management efforts or multiple people looking into the risk. There are different committees and councils where there are risks are discussed or reviewed and then looked at. Break down the silo, have a very common approach of how the risks are assessed. You need to have same approach on assessing the risk, identifying and assessing the risk, so that you understand what criticality of the risk is, right? If I say I have a medium risk and then a different department is saying they have a medium risk, are we in the same line? Are we talking about the same level of risk for the organization? And then even with that, when you do it, the last portion would be you always rate the risk qualitatively, right? You always have a qualitative assessment of the risk where you're saying low, medium, high, critical, but then also look into quantifying the risk, which is actually the transformational approach that we are taking right now, moving from a very qualitative risk into a very quantitative approach where we're actually quantifying the risk. If I say that there is a 30 million impact, I have quantified that effectively using the mechanisms and tool sets that I have.
One area where I think the risk industry or the GRC community is figuring out is how to use that risk to drive specific outcomes, right?
Right.
Historically, like if you go back like 5 to 7 or 10 years ago, in cyber risk management world, risk was more a reporting metric. It was used for reporting. But if you compare it to other functions like finance, for example, where risk is used to drive decisions.
Right.
Now, in your experience, Vinod, and with the program that you're driving, how are you thinking about using the risk measurement? What is the end outcome that you and your security teams, your peers, your CISO are trying to achieve?
Right. I think there's something called we started something called risk buy down as a process a couple of years ago, and the program that we're driving is to actually implement technology into that. And one of the strategy or approach that we have, and any GRC leader should be looking into, is moving from a current GRC approach where you actually have repetitive and reactive approach. I mentioned earlier about moving into more proactive. And one of the things to look as part of that is how can I drive value for business, right? How can I drive business value in the GRC effort? I do not see these two completely differently. I do see this connected in the sense if there is something that we're driving from a GRC or compliance or regulatory aspect, there is a business value involved in it right now. May it be from the regulatory compliance that we're doing, or may it be the risk mitigation that we're doing. There is a business value on the other side. Now, both of these needs to be connected, and then we need to understand what is that business value that I can drive from a GRC, as a function, a GRC program. And one main aspect of it is the risk quantification and mitigation, which is what is a risk buy down. Understanding the top cyber risk for the company through the identification mechanism, and then being able to say that these are the top cyber risks that I have, and then driving a mitigation that will actually have a direct impact to the business. Like I'll give you an example where if I have a risk that in my calculation, in my quantification, that says a $200 million impact to the company if anything has to happen in the future, then my next immediate action would be that how do I bring down the impact to the company from 200 million to whatever is acceptable at the leadership level, right? Mm-hmm. That bringing down is a business value to begin with, because now I'm reducing the impact from $200 million to $100 million. So I'm in a way, I'm actually giving $100 million reduction of the risk to the business, which is a business value. But at the same time, in order for me to do that, I do need to invest for the programs. I do need to invest for certain mitigation activity that would have a direct impact to the business. or to the corporate. But again, I'm actually then have to get investment dollars to do that. So that investment dollar in mitigation effort that you're doing could actually drive certain business growth and values, because you have current customers that are looking into the way that you're handling security measurements and mitigations. And with this mitigation activity, with the investment, with the risk buy down, you're actually improving your security posture that will have a direct impact to certain regulation controls, and then you're more compliant than before. And when you do that, you build more trust with your customer. You build more trust with your existing customer. You build more trust in the industry where there are new customers who are really willing to then doing business with you, because now you have a much better control. You're mitigating your risk and you're investing where it is really required. And then you're able to go and get new cybersecurity certifications. That is what the customer really wants. So I think there is always a connection. I know I mentioned a ripple effect into the process, but that's how I see the whole program. Like, there are requirements that you need to be adhering to, the regulations, and there are risks that you're going to mitigate. And then with the risk buy down program, we're basically saying, if I invest $2 million for these particular mitigation actions, I'm able to bring down the risk from $200 million to $100 million. Now, how did I get to this number? It's basically through the quantification mechanism that I have. And then once I continue to do this in implementation of the program, then I would then reevaluate how the mitigation is really helping me to bring it down to 100 million. And then at the same time, that is actually enabling growth for the business. So GRC to driving business value.
So, can you share your journey on how have you built an internal buy-in with your
Right.
management team and investment so that you can build this roadmap out?
A couple of years ago, we coined this term, risk buy down, right? And that's where it started. Like, the thought was that risk buy down will initially help us to buy down the risk for the company, as the name states. So we looked at, rather than going directly into a technology, we got an alignment with our CFO. But before we get to the CFO, we thought about the whole process on how the buy down would really work, right? So we built a customized program within Honeywell, which is it's a program that we have built called Risk Buy Down. We put the process around it, the strategy, and what it is going to drive, and how that is going to drive our investment decisions. So we created that program initially, and we actually started implementing it for that year's EOP. And then, with my boss Chase, and then CFO, we got an alignment on what that really means, how the risk buy down works, how are we doing the calculation, give a very clear understanding to the execs on what goes behind the quantification, right? If I say $30 million, here is how the $30 million. So give a very clear understanding of how the quantification is working, right? So my initial goal was to build a strategy, a process, implement it, get a buy-in from your CFO and your execs so that they understand, and then start using that as a repetitive, a process or a program, and then build that into your quarterly top cyber risk reporting process. And then integrate that with ERM so that enterprise risk management also understand the cyber risk that is coming from my program. In cyber tools or the risk management tools or the quantification tool, there's no real way for me to directly provide a value unless I have shown in my own process, this is why we needed technology. So before we got to the technology, we implemented the process and a well-oiled cycle, a well-oiled process, and then getting execs buy-in. And then now that they clearly understand what that is, we have driven that for 2 years. But my problem has always been there's always a risk and gap by doing a manual process outside of a system. So I have to give that understanding. If I have to drive it with much better data, if I have to bring more data sources, and then I have to use a lot of real data for my quantification, this needs to go into a tool. I wouldn't recommend directly jumping into a tool and doing it, but the main piece is also in the process, we were also evaluating tools. So I think picking the right tool is very important. So we were also going through the evaluation and understanding tool. And as you're very aware, we are currently implementing Safe One for quantification, right? So I think that's where we got to. So I would recommend taking that path. This has worked for us, and I do see a value in going through a maturity curve.
I think last year or over the last couple of years, more than half of the attacks have happened through a third party.
Yeah.
And so, how are you looking at third party risk management? How are you looking at the same level of sort of the same journey of maturity on managing that risk?
All of the vendors that we have, we have a funnel process where we kind of do identify the high risk security, high security risk suppliers for the company. So we do have a funnel where we identify those, suppliers. All of the suppliers go through onboarding process where understand what kind of access, and depending on the type of access, we see what kind of controls the suppliers are putting in. And then if those are high risk suppliers, then all of those suppliers will go through our TPRM program, where we have an ongoing assessment with the TPR, with the supplier, vendor, partner. And there are and we have foots on the ground for certain suppliers where we do site visits, we do supply visit, we do go to the supplier to understand how these controls and how supplier is managing Honeywell data, how are they providing access and how are they meeting all these different controls. The second portion to that is, while what I mentioned right now is the security portion, right? So there are also actions and activities that are happening for resiliency, for compliance when it comes to different regulations, non-cyber regulations. There are audits, there are different teams, are also doing it. So we're also bringing all of that together, partnering with these internal teams, and as understanding what is a unified risk for the supplier. We are approaching the end of the discussion here. We know for 2025, what do you think should be the three areas that a GRC leader and a CISO should look at? So I really think that number one is embracing technology and then being able to use transformation as the key for you. Every GRC leader should be looking at that. And then the second is, I think I mentioned about breaking down the silos. Second would be that, fostering cultural collaboration between different parts of the organization, break down the silo, get to an agreement about common frameworks and technology and common methodologies to be used. The other thing is regulations. Like the most important piece maybe is the regulations. I've seen the number of regulations grow in the past 4 to 5 years. I think it all started 6 years, maybe. It all started from GDPR and how the different regions and then globe and world has started looking into bringing different regulations. So I think keep up to date and up to speed with different regulations. Understand the similarity between the regulations that are coming in. Understand the delta that's coming in. You cannot always take every regulatory framework and implement in a company. You don't have to, because most of it there is a 90%, 95% overlap in the requirement. Asset management, access management. These are going to be same in every regulation, but there's going to be a delta. Understand the delta. Use technology and AI to understand the delta. So yeah, be agile and adaptable when it comes to regulations. Well, it was great to have you today. Really insightful conversation on the role of a GRC leader and how you are transforming and how to think about the maturity curve. I really like both enterprise risk and third-party risk management. How to, as you rightly said towards the end, how to think about technology, breaking down the silos, and being agile. So it will be a great. I think that I truly believe that other GRC leaders, practitioners will benefit from this conversation. And I just want to thank you very much for spending time with us. No, thank you, Pankaj. I think it was a great conversation, and I was, I think when you have different approaches and thoughts, I think it's always good to talk, and I'm very happy and glad that I was able to do that.
Thank you for tuning into the episode today. Hope you liked it. If you liked it, please share it with your colleagues. And don't forget to watch out for the next episode that releases in a couple of weeks. Thank you.